Hello, everyone. Welcome to week 2 of Fest Cap Track. And today's session is status transition flow and cap. And my name is Ajay Soring, and I'm the host for you today. And we have Simon Engel. And without further ado, I hand over to Simon. So, Simon, over to you.
Okay, yeah. Thank you for the introduction and also welcome for my side. For the presentation about the status transition flows in CAP. Yeah, my name is Simon. I'm part of the CAP development team. And today we will have a look at the status transition flows. We will do that by starting the presentation and having a look what flows are. So what we mean when we talk about flows. And then the main part of the presentation will be a demo on how to use the flows. For that, we will dive right into the code. And do like hands-on. I will show you how you can use it. After that main part, we will have a look at how the flows work internally, what we've done to make it work. So let's start with the definition of a status transition flow. So what we mean by that is that we have different statuses, like open, accepted, rejected, cancelled, and closed, the 5 statuses here. And then we have the transitions between them, which are accept, close, or cancel. And the statuses and the transitions together form the status transition flow. So this is from the simple S-slide example that you might know, but like in reality, they can be a lot bigger. You can have like 50 to 100 different statuses, lots of different transitions. So that really can be really complicated even in the picture. So what is the problem, or where are the restrictions in CAP? So currently we offer the declarative definitions of the data model in the form of CDS, where you can define everything in one central model. From that, we can generate all the basic CRUD operations that your application might need and that you might know. But what we cannot do is generate the business logic for that. So some kind of logic that is executed in the background, which is then needed to model the flows, because we need to check what the current status is, if it's allowed, and maybe have to do the change. This is all part of some custom business logic, which cannot be generated from CDS at the moment. So with those restrictions in mind, we can dive directly into the demo part and have a look at how to use the status transition flows. We will do that by, first of all, having a look at the custom implementation without the feature, where you will see a lot of boilerplate code. And then we will replace all of that old implementation with the new, for small implementation or small steps you need to take to achieve the same feature. Important to note, this is a lab preview, so not everything you see is already out there to be used. So there may be some changes coming up to it. Just keep it in mind. Okay, so let's dive right into the code. So what we can see here is the S-slide example and like a minimum example so that we can use it. We can quickly have a look at the flow. So I have the flow we saw earlier. This is the flow we want to model. So this is just a diagram from .io, which I imported here. So we have in mind what we want to model. So it's the same we saw earlier. So it should be pretty clear, the different statuses and then the transitions between them. And so you can see we have 4 different transitions, which are accept, cancel, reject, and close. And these are the actions of our travel entity. So here again, we have accept, reject, cancel, and close. Then we have different statuses, which are 5 we can see here, and they also can be found in the data model. So we have our 5 statuses defined here. We can find them in the travel entity. We have our travel status, which then is an association to the travel status with the code coming from our travel status code, which is defined here. And then some other field controls stuff, but we don't need that for now. Now, besides the action definition we can see here, we have the same We have almost the same in the action implementations, because as we saw in restrictions, we can just define the actions in the model, but not generate some business logic out of that. So we would need, without the flow feature, do that by ourselves. So we can have a look at one of the handlers that would need to be manually implemented. So we can have a look at except travel, how this works. First of all, we have to get the current travel from the database and then check if it exists. And if it does, this is where the transition flow logic comes in, where we check that the status code needs to be open. And if that's not the case, then we write a custom error message to tell the user that this was not allowed. If everything was fine with the entry check, we can do the status change then with an update, and then we can change to accepted when we accept the channel. As you can see, this is exactly the same for all the other actions we have. Rejecting follows the same pattern, canceling, and then closing everything follows the same pattern. As you can see, all of the logic of the status transition flow really lies in here in the if condition check, and then in the update clause down here. So it's really spread around, and the readability is not that high. Next to that, which is the server logic, we also need to write custom field control for all our actions. So we again have a look at accept travel. So all of this field control stuff is needed to update the UI accordingly. So we want to disable the button, which can be done via the operation available. And again, we have to check, okay, is the travel status code equal to open? And again, you can see if there would be a change now in the logic of the flow, we would need to change it somewhere here in the conditions or in the update clauses. And then we would need to update it right here in our UI annotations. We also have to set the side effects. So in case an action changes something, then we need to tell the UI that it needs to update. As you can see, this is the same for all of them. Again, in case there are multiple conditions, like for canceling, that pretty quickly gets pretty large, lots of boilerplate code. And this is still with the easy example. So you can imagine with a big process, big business process, this would be hundreds of lines of code just to define the UI. So with that, we can start it. And now we can see the running S-Flight application. So we have a look now at how it works with the manual implementation. Keep that in mind, and then we will replace that with the new flow feature and see if it still stays the same. So we have our flight here. Currently, it's in status open, and if we now accept it, see, okay, accepting is not allowed anymore, which should be the case, and then this changes to accepted. Maybe close to finish the process, you can see, okay, all actions here are not allowed anymore, and this changed to closed. So this is the behavior we want to achieve now with the flow feature. For that, we can start by going to the travel service and remove all the code we wrote earlier to do the manual checks. And then we can also remove all of the front end code, almost all of the front end code. One of these four. But now none of them is being used anymore. So now all of our manual implementation is gone, and we can go back to our model. We can get our flow next to that. Perfect. And now we can start to model it. This is done via 3 annotations that we introduced to CDS. So the first one is the annotation flow work status. For that, we tell the compiler and CAP that this travel status field, which is defined here as the association, is the one which keeps the status for the whole flow. Then there are two more annotations which we can then use to really model the flow. The first one is get from. Now we can see we have accept travel, which is this accept error, and this is the only one. So we can say accepting goes from open, and then next annotation goes to accepted, where the open and accepted enum values here are the ones that are defined. So we can do the same now for the other ones. We can say rejecting, again, is allowed from open, and we will go to rejected. Canceling, no, which is the next one, is allowed from open and from accepted. So the wrong one can also be an array. So it's open and accepted. And closing again is only allowed from accepted and then to closed. So as you can see, we now only have 4 lines where the whole flow is defined. This is everything that was done in the custom field control and in the custom handlers before. The only thing we need to do to make it work is to add the compile for flows flag in our CSS features. So all the UI annotation generation takes place in the background. So check, okay, it started. And if we go again, we now can see, okay, close is not allowed anymore. It's instead is open. If we accept, this changes to accepted. We can now close it. Again, finishes the process. Everything is not allowed anymore, and this changed to closed. So it was a success, and the thing we achieved with these 4 lines is exactly the same as we did before with the lots of boilerplate code. So with that simple flow done, we can have a look at the next example. This only includes the changes we want to do now to our model, to our flow. So what you can see is that we now have a conditional change when we accept the travel from this that is open. So what we are saying is, okay, we check the price. If the price is higher than 4,000, then we will go to rejected. So auto reject if it's too expensive. And if the price is equal or lower to 4,000, then we will go to accepted, which is the thing we want to achieve when accepting. So with that example, next to here again, so we have it in mind, we can show that the from and to annotations you see here can be used independently from one another. So because the to now is not only a simple state, but some kind of logic needs to be executed, we can for now remove this. So we only have at from, and with that, only the entry state to the accept transition is validated by CAP. You could also use just the to annotation, and then there would be no entry check, but only the update to the value defined here. So to achieve this, we then need to add a custom handler, because the flow feature is written with maximum freedom to the developer in mind, because we say all the simple stuff which can be defined via simple annotations can be done via simple annotations, and everything that is more complex can then be moved to custom implementations, which will then override everything done by the flow feature. So we can have a look at this custom handler. We say we get the current travel from the database and then do the check on the price. If it's higher than 4,000, then we will go to rejected, and if it's lower or equal to 4,000, we'll go to accepted. So let's check that. We can have a look here. We can now accept, and the price is 3,500, so this should go to open. Try it out. So let's spot one thing. What we have to do now, because we move the 2, and the 2 removes the 2 adds the side effects, so we have to add them manually. So let's go for the restart, and let's try it again. Yeah, maybe that's something we can take out. 1 second. Oh. Okay, now it worked. So maybe just restart, and then we can remove everything in between. So let's go to the browser, we reload. Now we that is open, we can accept it, and we go to accept it, which is fine because the price is lower than 4,000. And then if we have a look at another one where the price is higher than 6,000, we should go from open but to rejected if we accept. Let's try it out. Perfect. It's rejected. This updates accordingly, and everything is fine. So we also can, let's get the picture up, and have conditions as complex as you like, just by overwriting it with manual logic. So let's quickly reword all the changes we made, because we want to have a look at another example. So the next example is a little bit more complex. Can have a look at that. And what we are doing is introducing a new state with the name blocked. So blocked is reachable via rejected, open, and accept when you block. Think of some kind of logic where anybody who has some concerns with the flight or something to say just hits block, and then everything is paused. This is what we want to model with this. And then, the complex part is that with unblocking, or going to the previous one, we want to return to the state where we've been before. So if we are in state open and we block, then if we go to the previous one, we should go back to open. If we are in accepted and we block, then we should go to the previous accepted one. So this is some kind of more complex logic, which you can also model via the flow feature. So let's have a look at that, how we can do it. First of all, we need to add the blocked state here, because we introduced a new state. And then we can add 2 new actions. Blocked, and the second one being called previous. So we need to hook them to the UI, so we can click them. No. And then we can say this is previous, and this is also previous. As you can see, we should now see them in the UI. We can also add them you can also add annotations to them. You can say from, which is an array now. And look at blocked example. Blocked is reachable from open, accepted, and rejected. So we can here and accepted. and this goes to the state blocked. Then the previous action, which is this arrow here, is reachable from blocked, and this is now where the special case comes in. This goes to $flow retrieved. This is a special variable that is used here to indicate cup. Okay, let's go back to the one where we've been before. Now the service restarts, and we can have a look at it. You can see we are in status open now. If we accept, we should be able to block it. Now it's blocked, and if we go into previous, 1 second, we have to take a new object to make it work. So now we can try it again. And since it's open, we accept. We are now in it. And if edit and block, we should go to block, and that should go to previous. Out. It's blocked. That didn't work. Oh yeah, because that's another mistake I made. So we have to start again. After adding these annotations here, there's one more thing we need to do, which is adding the flow history aspect, to our entity, which is used for the flow, which is this one. And with that, we tell cup to save the history in the background. So again, if you now create a new object, which is in status open, and you accept, this should then by blocking go to blocked and then go back to accept. So it's blocked, and if we click previous, this will go back to accepted perfectly. And also maybe create a new object, which is now in status open. If we block it now and then go to previous, this is again in status open. But if we reject it, then block it, then it goes previous directly back to rejected. So with this flow history feature, we can add complex cases, blocked or paused processes like this. There are two different kinds we can use for that. The first one is history-based approach, which is the standard one that is in where if we go for 3, and then we go previous, then we would go to 2, and if we now go to the previous again, we would now go back to 3. So we can have a look at that in the UI. That we need to do a little change. We just remove the ROM case for the previous year. So previous now works as an overall go back button. If we now create a new object and we accept and now go to previous, this will go back to open. But because we use a history, we will now go back to accepted. Open, accepted. As you can see here, we are just jumping around between them. Because with history enabled, which is the standard mode, every change is appended to our queue. So we could also call this queue and not history. And then we would take the second last change we did and go through that one. In case that is not the behavior you want, but you want a overall go back button like here, you can do this via the stack. Add if you have 1, 2, 3, and then go to the previous, you would go to 2, and another previous would take you to 1. So we can have a look at that. That we have to go to package.json again, and we can enable flows history stack. So we tell cup, please use the stack here. After that, this should restart, which it does. And if we now create a new one, we are open, and it's accepted, and then it's closed. Our order now is open, accepted, close. So if you go to the previous, this should go to accepted. And this is the change now with the stack, that if we click on previous again, we go back to open. So we can go back the whole chain of events that happened before. These are the two different approaches. The queue being the standard one, and the stack being the one you can opt in. With that, we can come back to the presentation. So how does this work in the background? So as always in CAP, we register some handlers. So, and the request goes through them. The blue ones you would see now are the ones added by the flow feature, and the white ones are the ones that are already there. So the initially we will do the status check. So is it allowed to enter this stage? So it's checked whether the current status is part of the entry actions. After that, all the other before handlers are executed that are already there. And then the new handler we add is a new on handler, which does the status change. After that, all the other on handlers and all the other after handlers are executed like normal. From the flow history, we created an aspect which has the field transitions underscore, which is a composition of many objects, with each object having timestamp user, the managed attributes here, and then also the status that it was changed to, and a comment for future purposes. Then when we go to the flow, the previous one, we can look up the latest transition we want to change to. And then depending on the behavior, we can either delete or add something to our transitions. In the case of the stack, we just delete from these transitions underscore, so we pop from the stack, or we can add something to the queue and just append it. So yeah, it works like we've seen before. And some future considerations for the flow features are to make this work productively and release it so everybody can use it. And another thing we are thinking about are maybe conditions directly in the annotations, so that the price depending transition we've seen earlier could become defined in the annotations. Another nice thing would be code completion within the add flow or add from and add to annotations. And another nice thing would be a graphical editor where we could click together like all the statuses and transitions, and then from that the annotations are generated. With that, we are at the end of the session. Thank you for attending, and thank you for the attention, and have fun with all the other Declaratively sessions coming up.